The air is cold, the wind is sharp, and you can taste copper when your lips crack open. Just 3 hours ago, the sound of the massacre ended, leaving only this scent of smoke and iron and salt mixing into the sharp February air. You're 26 years old, and you are kneeling in the mud.
And until sunrise this morning, you were Queen Brenia of the Nervi, you were the wife of King Boudicca, mother of 2 sons, and this is crucial, priestess of the sacred grove.
You were the most powerful woman in a nation that had successfully resisted conquest for generations.
And now your wrists are bound behind your back with rope that's just cutting into your flesh.
Roman soldiers are all around you, moving with this, chilling, practiced efficiency. They're sorting 600 captured women.
It's an inventory, a cold-blooded inventory of human property.
Yeah, separating the young from the old, the beautiful from the plain, the valuable from the, disposable.
You know you're the centerpiece of this whole operation because the Legion commander, Legatus Gaius Cornelius Scipio, he hasn't taken his eyes off you.
He's just standing apart, imposing in his armor, handsome in that ruthless, predatory way.
Completely composed, utterly without mercy. And that silent observation is, well, it's its own kind of terror, isn't it?
It is. He finally issues his command, his educated Latin just slicing through the noise. The queen! Bring her to my tent.
Have her cleaned, but not clothed.
Yeah, clothed.
I want to examine what we've captured. But as the soldiers are hauling you to your feet, you see it.
King Boudicca, your husband, the father of your children, displayed on a Roman spear, his head mounted like a hunting trophy for their entertainment.
And in that one instant, the immediate visceral horror, it locks away the grief. It's an intellectual shutdown of emotions.
Right. It's replaced by a single terrifying realization.
You're the last surviving authority in your nation.
Okay, let's unpack this right away. We are diving into a systematic and, let's be honest, an often suppressed history of what Roman legions actually did to the women of defeated tribes. This deep dive is not about the glorious Roman lens of battles and celebrated strategy. It's through the lens of one high-value prisoner, Queen Brenia, who became, in that single moment, the vessel of her nation's sovereignty.
Our mission today is analytical. We're examining the specific horrors that were reserved for captured queens, the precise economic and political hierarchies of value Rome assigned to prisoners, and how Brenia mounted this cunning, long-game resistance.
She used her specialized knowledge and, this is the key, the empire's own internal political fissures to survive and execute revenge.
Over 12 long years. This is a manual on how to invert the tools of the conqueror.
The sheer speed and that cold efficiency of the Roman processing system, that's the first thing that really hits you.
It is.
The sources detail the movement through 600 women with the efficiency of men who have done this 1,000 times. It's not just cleanup.
No, it's an immediate, cold-blooded assessment of future assets.
Yeah.
That Roman efficiency is rooted in their law of conquest. Once a city falls or a tribe is defeated, the people, particularly women and children, they instantly become res property of the Roman state.
So the army is just conducting an inventory.
Exactly, because their objective is twofold. It's military dominance, yes, but it's also economic exploitation. Every life has to be categorized based on its potential monetary or, symbolic value.
And Scipio, the legatus, he embodies that cold power. He doesn't need to get his hands dirty.
No.
His silent observation is the real source of menace because he's calculating the highest possible use of his newest prize.
His command is a perfect illustration of this dual-purpose economic and psychological. Bring her to my tent, clean her but not clothed. That instruction, not closed, is so deliberate.
It's the instant public stripping of all status.
And all political identity. He wants to examine what we've captured, treating the Queen of the Nervi exactly like a high-value piece of livestock he's inspecting for purchase. The humiliation is essential.
Because she represents the nation itself.
She is the nation in that moment.
You mentioned that the sight of Boudicca's head was the turning point. Can we just sit on that for a second? The immediate horror locks away the grief. That sounds less like a human reaction and more like a tactical, psychological shutdown.
It is. It demanded the cessation of everything that made her Brenia, the wife, the mother, the woman in love. She became essentially a hard vessel of calculation.
Grief is a distraction she just can't afford.
Cannot afford. She recognizes that seeing her husband's head isn't just an act of cruelty, it's a communication. It's a statement of total Roman dominance.
And her only possible counter-communication is to survive long enough to act.
Which means she has to immediately identify her leverage.
And what she realizes is that while the Romans have brute force, they don't have her specialized knowledge.
Right.
The tribal treasury location, the concealed sacred druid artifacts, and the safe location where her sons were sent. Her physical person is a trophy, but her mind is a fortress.
A fortress containing tactical intelligence.
Yeah.
Exactly. She understands her body is highly perishable, but the information in her mind is the only true currency she possesses.
This exclusive knowledge, it's her shield against immediate destruction.
It is.
So let's pull back and provide the structural context for this cruelty, because it wasn't random brutality, was it?
No, not at all. It was a deeply organized policy designed to maximize profit and political symbolism. When Rome conquered a tribe, the disposition of female captives followed a clear, codified hierarchy.
This hierarchy is central to understanding how Rome monetized degradation.
It was an economic calculation first, and a moral one never. The sources break down 4 pretty distinct tiers based on utility.
So, starting at the bottom, the common women farmers' wives, craftsmen's daughters, the ordinary population.
They represented the bulk commodity, the mass labor pool. These women were sold en masse to slave traders, often right at the site of conquest or marched quickly to the major slave markets.
And their destiny was
The hardest, least desirable work. Agricultural slavery on remote estates, basic domestic service, or very often involuntary placement into state-controlled prostitution across the vast network of Roman roads and camps.
their individual identity was totally irrelevant.
Completely, they were just fungible units of labor.
Okay, so above them, the middle tier. That included skilled women weavers, brewers, maybe midwives.
Their value was immediately higher because of their craft. They weren't sold in bulk, they were sold individually, often commanding a significant premium.
A skilled weaver could produce goods for a wealthy Roman estate.
Exactly, reducing the owner's reliance on the market. Their value derived entirely from their specialized training, making them desirable to specific buyers rather than just mass traders.
And then we get to the upper tier.
Yeah.
Noble women, wives of minor chiefs, respected warriors. This tier begins to intersect with status, though it's still relative.
Correct. Their former social status translates into perceived refinement and, well, market quality. These noble women were often kept directly by officers as personal servants or concubines during the campaign itself.
And if they were sold back in Rome.
It was usually to wealthy, established Romans looking for exotic companions or highly cultured domestic managers. Their value was a blend of utility and social status. They were luxury goods.
And then right at the very top, where Brenia sat, queens and princesses, the highest value captures. These weren't just property.
They were the ultimate, irreplaceable trophies.
Their capture demonstrated the absolute subjugation of the entire defeated nation.
A queen kneeling in chains was the ultimate proof that the highest authority in a barbarian land meant absolutely nothing when faced with the might of a Roman legion.
Their use was purely symbolic and political.
Displayed prominently in Roman triumphs, those massive, extravagant parades through the capital, and sometimes gifted to powerful men as signals of political access and military success. Their existence, even years later, served as an ongoing testament to Rome's dominance.
So their value was less about labor and more about pure symbolism and public degradation. Which brings us to the specific, terrifying fate designed for these queens, which later historians deliberately tried to suppress because it was so politically ugly. What was this special entertainment that Brenia knew was waiting for her?
The required degradation was systematic. The goal was to destroy the identity of the queen, to symbolically destroy the nation itself. This included being renamed with a generic Latin name, being stripped of all royal trappings, and being forced into public acts of submission.
But the ultimate violation was the intimate degradation, the euphemism you mentioned.
Yes, the special entertainment or hospitality purposes. The sources make it chillingly clear that this was systematic, intimate use designed to maximize the humiliation of the highest status female captive.
Your queens were often assigned to officers' quarters.
Or even sometimes paraded before the troops. This wasn't merely random assault. It was a calculated political act of psychological destruction. To subject the embodiment of national sovereignty to such treatment was to permanently sever the link between the people and their former authority.
Brenia understood this was not just personal suffering, but the end of her dignity and, symbolically, the final victory of Rome over the Nervi.
It's the ultimate weaponized psychological terror. And Brynja knows her only protection is to immediately replace her symbolic value with tactical value. This knowledge gives her an absolute, immediate deadline.
Brennia's psychological shift is the whole foundation of her resistance. She enters Scipio's tent not as a pleading captive.
No, she enters as a political entity offering a necessary service. She has consciously set aside her grief, replacing it with this cold, clear focus. She is the vessel of her nation's sovereignty.
And that vessel must survive to protect its contents, her sons. She's brought into Scipio's tent, which must have been just a spectacle of Roman excess. It's larger than her childhood home, filled with transported, civilized comforts carpets, bronze oil lamps, a massive desk covered in maps and scrolls.
All the apparatus of civilization being used to conduct total destruction hundreds of miles from Rome. It's designed to overwhelm.
Scipio circles her, confirming his three primary targets of interest.
The Druid artifacts, the tribal treasury, and her sons. The artifacts, because the burned grove yielded nothing of spiritual or material value. The treasury, because conquest needs to be profitable.
And the sons, because they are hostages who secure future compliance from any surviving pockets of resistance.
Right. And Scipio starts the interrogation, but he reveals too much of his own intelligence. He knows she's a queen and a priestess, initiated into mysteries forbidden to ordinary women.
He quotes her own traditions back to her.
He does. He says, your people's own traditions confirm this. The Druids made exceptions for the ruling line. This tells Brynja two crucial things.
1. Roman intelligence is sophisticated and detailed.
And 2, there has already been significant treachery from within her own people. Scipio is already one step ahead, which means her window of opportunity is even smaller than she initially thought.
This is the moment Brynja performs her revolutionary move. Scipio expected the standard playbook: defiance, pleading, or silence.
Instead, she offers negotiation. She throws his own expected response right back at him. Everyone is always in a position to negotiate.
It's a fundamental challenge to the absolute power dynamic. She strips away the emotional layer and forces him into a professional, transactional mindset.
And her counter-argument to torture is brilliant. It appeals directly to his practical nature.
Torture produces unreliable information.
Right. If he wants the accurate, actionable locations for the treasure, and more importantly for her children, he needs her genuine cooperation.
She understands that for a pragmatic legatus like Scipio, accurate information is worth infinitely more than the momentary satisfaction of cruelty.
She presents the information as a time-sensitive, valuable asset that only she can guarantee. She essentially says, if you break me, the data is corrupted.
So what are the precise terms she offers, the negotiation for her life and the lives of her sons?
The terms are rigid and focus purely on preservation. First, her sons' lives. Not their freedom, which she knows is impossible.
But their survival.
Their survival. Assigned immediately to household service in a non-military capacity, fed, sheltered, and allowed to grow to adulthood. They must not be immediately sold off as common slaves.
And second, her own life. Not freedom or comfort, but survival.
Assigned to purposes that specifically exclude the systematic intimate abuse, the special entertainment.
Scipio's reaction is so telling. He's surprised, then amused. He recognizes the tactical intelligence in her response.
He finds her tenacity entertaining. He concedes that her sons could be assigned to his household as valued property, emphasizing that they are his to dispose of, but granting her immediate request.
But he's vague about her own fate.
He is. He acknowledges that while a queen is a significant trophy with expectations, alternatives exist if her intelligence is truly unique. She pushes back again, demanding concrete assurance, not vague possibilities.
And this is where she seals the deal, expertly summarizing her true leverage.
I have the ability to give you true information or false information, and you will not know the difference until your search parties have wasted weeks following wrong directions, allowing the rest of my people to scatter.
She weaponizes his limited time.
And Scipio is genuinely impressed. He admits none of the other 6 defeated tribal leaders he has processed ever spoke to him with such clarity. He recognizes her value as a strategic opponent who can provide operational security.
He pours her wine, and with her hands still bound, she begins to talk.
But the real game begins with the strategic lie. She gives him a version of the truth.
Precisely. The treasury location was correct in direction and topographical description.
But deliberately inaccurate in distance and terrain detail.
Wait, why not just give completely false information? Wouldn't that buy her more time if they failed entirely?
That's the subtlety of this gamble. If she gave completely false information, say, a location in the opposite direction, Scipio would instantly recognize it as sabotage,
And the torture would begin immediately.
and the information would be irrelevant. By giving him information that looks right for the first day or two of tracking, she validates his overall pursuit and critically validates her own trustworthiness as a negotiating partner.
She gives him just enough truth to confirm her value, but enough deception to waste his resources.
Her vital goal,
Right.
to waste 3 days. 3 days of Scipio search parties following a false trail means 3 days for her to identify allies, exploit Roman vulnerabilities, and construct a much better position before the deception is discovered.
Scipio thinks the negotiation is over.
Brunnia knows she's just secured the starting gun for the real marathon.
The moment she is moved to that small, guarded servant's tent near the legatus's quarters, she knows Scipio is still hedging.
Right. He hasn't committed to destruction, nor has he committed to full protection. She has about 72 hours, maybe less, before his search parties return empty-handed and his trust completely dissolves.
And her method of intelligence gathering is sheer necessity. She is fluent in Latin, learned from traders and dealers in the border markets years ago.
And she uses the canvas walls of the tent, which transmit sound perfectly, eavesdropping on passing officers. She's hunting for structural weaknesses in the Roman operation.
She overhears a critical conversation. The officers aren't worried about the treasure. They're discussing the difficulty of finding the sons and, more fundamentally, questioning if the military campaign has truly been successful.
And one officer voices the suspicion that changes everything: the Druid network.
The officers speculate that if Boudicca is truly a priestess, she would know about the Druid safe houses maintained throughout Gaul for hiding both people and objects.
A kind of underground railway for intelligence and resistance.
Exactly. The official Roman narrative, stretching back decades to Caesar, was that the Druid network had been utterly destroyed. But the military men on the ground, faced with persistent small-scale resistance, suspected it had only gone underground.
If that network survived and was coordinated, Rome hadn't conquered a nation. They had only seized a capital city. They were sitting on a volatile intelligence crisis.
And this is Brunia's confirmation. The Druids had scattered, hidden, and waited, and she knew the specific protocols to contact them.
She is now exponentially more valuable, but also exponentially more dangerous.
Because she represents a continuous, coordinated threat that Scipio desperately wants to neutralize.
This increased value acts as a beacon, drawing not just Scipio, but other interested parties. This is when Tribune Marcus Aurelius Cato Co arrives.
Younger, maybe 30, and he approaches her with curiosity, not assessment.
Co is introduced as a tribune attached to the legion for unspecified reasons, which should immediately raise alarms.
He cuts right to the chase, ignoring the niceties of her captivity. He asks the central question: the Druid network, is it still active?
His entire demeanor signals that he's operating on a different organizational axis than Scipio. He reveals his purpose by presenting a truly shocking proposition. He belongs to an alternative Roman faction.
A powerful minority that believes the current approach of endless terror and conquest is financially and militarily unsustainable for the empire.
This isn't just about being nice. This is high-level Roman politics. The informed listener knows that Rome was constantly riven by political infighting, often between the old guard militaristic, resource extractive, and the pragmatists.
The ones focused on long-term stability and tax revenue.
Exactly. Co's faction represents the pragmatists. They see the scorched earth policy of men like Scipio as short-sighted. It costs too much blood and gold to constantly police a hostile, conquered territory.
They seek accommodation and integration with Gaul.
They view the surviving Druid network not as a target for destruction, but as potential infrastructure. A disciplined, structured communication channel that could facilitate long-term stability.
Co offers a path that doesn't end with her destruction, but requires her to reveal the secrets to them. Brunnia must have immediately suspected a highly sophisticated manipulation.
Oh, absolutely. Why should she trust a Roman who talks of peace when all she has ever known is conquest?
Her survival mechanism kicks in immediately. She tests Co, questioning the very idea of Roman aristocrats prioritizing peace over plunder.
Co confirms they are a minority faction, but one with high-level connections in the Senate and Rome. He argues that establishing contact with the unified resistance network could be the first step toward a new, federated relationship with the conquered peoples.
Ensuring future revenue and fewer military expenses. It's still about Roman self-interest.
Always. But it's a self-interest that aligns with her survival.
This is the moment Brunnia realizes she isn't playing one game against Scipio,
But two games, simultaneously, against two opposing Roman factions. Scipio's destruction faction versus Co's accommodation faction.
This internal Roman conflict is her most profound, unexpected leverage.
Scipio wants to use her knowledge to destroy the threat completely. Co wants to use her knowledge to build a political bridge that benefits his career and his faction.
Her ultimate goal is still survival and her son's future, but achieving that requires exploiting this fundamental Roman division. She has to weigh which faction offers the better, more secure path to that goal.
And Co, sensing her deep deliberation, emphasizes the urgency. He warns her explicitly. Scipio's initial trust is superficial and limited by time. She has to act quickly.
Before Scipio's search parties return, and he commits to a permanent destructive course of action.
Meaning the special entertainment.
Brainia was operating on borrowed time. She had 72 hours, maybe less, but the clock ran out catastrophically early.
After only 36 hours, Scipio's search parties returned, and they had found the treasury anyway.
The initial strategic lie failed, not because of her mistake, but because of treachery.
Scipio summons her back, and his calm, predatory amusement is gone, replaced by this chilling, professional fury. He confronts her with the evidence, a detailed, accurate map showing the real location of the treasury, the artifacts, and the safe houses.
And she recognized the handwriting instantly.
Caddick, her younger brother.
She thought he was dead. Instead, he was cooperating, trading everything he knew, including the specific layout of the Druid sanctuaries, for freedom and a new identity.
The betrayal must have been a physical blow, worse than any rope or strike. Caddick was also initiated into the Druid mysteries. He made a devastating calculus of suffering.
He traded hundreds of lives and the security of his people for his own comfortable survival as a protected collaborator.
All of Brinia's exclusive leverage was gone.
Scipio, now fully in control, presents his new final ultimatum. He has the locations and the treasures, but her brother didn't know the most critical part of the network.
The operational intelligence. He lacks the network's contact protocols, the specific secret methods used by senior priestesses to activate and communicate across the scattered underground infrastructure. Caddick knew where things were. Greenia knew how the remaining system functioned.
Scipio demands those protocols by sunset.
If she refuses, the negotiation is over, and the fate she feared, the special entertainment, begins tonight.
She has lost almost all her options. The network protocols are the absolute last thing she has left to trade. She has to execute a final, desperate gamble to buy just a few more hours.
What is her counter-demand? It's a psychological stroke of genius, focusing entirely on maintaining her value and Scipio's patience.
She refuses to reveal the protocols until she sees her sons and confirms they are safe within Roman custody.
But her sons are already beyond his reach, right? Lugerix took them to safety. So why demand to see them in Roman custody?
Because Scipio doesn't know they are safe. She's leveraging his belief that he could still find them and use them against her.
She argues logically that the network knowledge is her last, most valuable card. If she gives it up without tangible proof of her son's immediate physical safety, she loses all leverage forever.
She forces him to consider her as a mother whose primary motivation is her children, confirming that her stubbornness is genuine and rooted in a desire that even a Roman legatus could understand.
And Scipio has to weigh his fury against the potential intelligence. The network protocols are valuable enough to warrant meeting her condition. He agrees to intensify the search for her sons, giving her until the next morning.
But he doubles the guard on her tent and forbids anyone from approaching her without his express permission. He thinks he has locked down the timeline and the asset.
But this slight delay, this window purchased by sheer willpower, is exactly what Co needed.
Co returns late that afternoon, bypassing Scipio's guards with the confidence of someone with higher connections, and delivers the intelligence Brenia needs most.
The news about her sons. Co confirms, "My riders were faster. We found the farmstead, but Lugerix successfully took them across the river to territory beyond immediate Roman control. Scipio's men found the house, but the boys are gone, far beyond the reach of the legatus."
This is the strategic pivot. Brenia has lost her leverage over Scipio because he can no longer threaten her sons.
But Co immediately renews his offer. The network knowledge is still valuable, if not more so, to the accommodation faction.
He makes the buyout proposition irresistible.
He offers to formally acquire Brenia as a state-paid consultant advisor, ensuring she is treated as a valued expert, not a prisoner of war. and the terms for her sons are critical.
They would be educated in Rome, raised as citizens, positioned for futures ordinary slaves could never access.
They would not just survive, they would thrive within the system that destroyed their homeland.
This is survival disguised as collaboration. She realizes this is the best outcome from the total wreckage. It protects her sons and provides the means for future resistance.
She asks the tactical question, when do we leave?
The plan is put in motion immediately.
Boudicca reveals the precise, secure location where she sent her sons, guaranteeing their continued protection and confirming her good faith to Co. Carene arranges transportation tonight, 2 hours after midnight, moving her out of Scipio's custody and into the custody of his own influential faction.
She bought her survival with the strategic preservation of information, culminating in the exploitation of Roman infighting.
As Brini is moved by cart south toward Rome, past bribed sentries, she's a queen without a kingdom, but she is alive.
And she made the calculated decision that survival, even in exile, was the only way to preserve her line and enact long-term revenge.
Her motivation shifts entirely. It's no longer about immediate safety, but the purposeful exile, the long, methodical goal of turning her forced collaboration into a weapon. She resolves to make Rome pay for every inch of dignity and life they stole.
The next 12 years are the core of this deep dive, this systematic preparation for revenge. She is now an official consultant for Roman aristocrats who view Gaul as a future partner, not a perpetual conquest. How did she use this position?
She was literally studying the enemy from the inside, and she treated it like advanced education. Her position gave her unparalleled access to Roman inner workings. For 12 years, she was immersed in learning the specific mechanisms of power,
Roman politics, the intricacies of their law,
and the complex methods of acquiring and exercising influence. It was a masterclass in the enemy's operational doctrine.
What specifically was she learning about Roman law and politics? It must have been completely alien to her tribal background.
It was. She learned that Rome was governed not by divine right or tribal consensus, but by written, codified law, which was constantly interpreted and manipulated. She studied the mechanism of appeals, the processes for provincial governance, and the financial structure of taxation.
She discovered that Roman power, while brutal, was heavily bureaucratic.
And bureaucracy, like any machine, has friction points and vulnerabilities.
She would have been required to attend aristocratic social functions with Co's faction. Did she use these social settings as learning opportunities?
Absolutely. The Roman convivium, the dinner party, was not just for eating. It was where power was exchanged and gossip was traded.
As a respected, exotic Gaelic specialist, she had a seat at these tables.
And she listened. She listened to discussions about tax farming failures, political appointments, which senators were vulnerable to debt, and which legates were too ambitious. These were crucial intelligence briefings disguised as polite conversation.
She learned the unwritten rules of patronage and political maneuvering that determined success or failure in the empire.
And all the while, she had to maintain the careful deception that she was a willing collaborator, fully integrated into the Roman system.
The deception was absolute.
She adopted a Roman name, mastered the Roman accent, and perfected the Roman dress. She had to become the perfect example of the assimilated barbarian respected for her utility, but never so influential that she became a threat to the aristocracy itself.
Meanwhile, the survival and education of her line was paramount. Her sons grew up educated as Romans, moving within the highest echelons of society, but secretly retaining their Nervian identity. How did she manage that without detection?
This was her true masterpiece of covert operations. Her sons, given tutors and Roman education, were fully immersed in Latin and Roman history. But in the privacy of their secluded household quarters, she became the secret teacher of history and language.
She spoke only Nervian to them at night.
She told them the true stories of their grandfather, King Boudicca, and the sacred history of the Druids, all framed within a larger narrative of strategy and patience.
She essentially built two entirely separate identities in her children.
Yes. They grew up as young men who were jick enough to be trusted entirely by the scattered Nervian resistance elements. They spoke the language, knew the customs, and understood the struggle.
But they were Roman enough to move seamlessly within Roman society.
This duality was the ultimate weapon, a bridge between two worlds that only they could traverse.
And the Druid network, the asset she preserved by refusing to give up the protocols, was also strengthening during this period.
The network survived and evolved. The protocol she preserved allowed the scattered elements to reconnect. But more importantly, living in Rome, Boudicca taught the network new ways to communicate.
She introduced methods of coded correspondence, financial transfers, and intelligence relays that mimic the sophisticated Roman systems.
The resistance didn't just survive. It became a coordinated professional underground, far more effective than the tribal structure it replaced.
This required superhuman patience, tracking her chief enemies, Scipio and Caddic, for over a decade.
Absolute discipline. She tracked Scipio's career rise, noting his arrogance and military successes that eventually won him a lucrative provincial governorship. She also tracked her brother, Caddic, who used his betrayal to become a prosperous, anonymous merchant in a distant, stable province.
She didn't seek immediate emotional retribution.
She waited for the perfect structural opportunity to destroy them via the system they trusted. She understood that power, when mismanaged, eventually creates its own vulnerabilities.
The opportunity arrived in the 12th year, Scipio's provincial governorship. A post that promised wealth and prestige faced a major crisis.
A widespread tax revolt threatening to escalate into a full uprising. Scipio, the classic military mind, needed expertise on local population dynamics.
And Co's accommodation faction was perfectly positioned to provide exactly the Gallic specialist he needed. This is the culmination of Brennia's long game.
It is the moment she cashes in her 12 years of patience. Co's faction arranged for Brennia to be assigned to Scipio's staff as an expert consultant, tasked with analyzing the local mood and recommending solutions to defuse the revolt without costly military intervention.
She walked right back into the life of the man who intended to break her body and spirit. But 12 years, a Roman name, Roman clothing, and a flawless accent concealed her identity.
Scipio saw a middle-aged, highly professional consultant, not the captive queen.
She became indispensable to his staff.
She studied his schedule, his relationships with his local administration, and the flow of intelligence from Roman informants. She learned his vulnerabilities, his reliance on short-term military solutions, his contempt for local populations, and his overconfidence.
And this intelligence wasn't used to fix the revolt.
It was systematically fed back into the Druid resistance network. Brennia ensured the resistance knew which route Scipio's patrols would take, where his supply lines were weakest, and exactly which local collaborators were feeding him intelligence.
She used her knowledge of Roman operational security to destroy Scipio's operational security.
The orchestrated defeat was profound. The revolt did not just continue. It became a coordinated, geographically spread insurrection that anticipated every Roman move. Scipio's authority completely collapsed.
The result was total military and administrative failure.
Scipio was recalled to Rome, disgraced, ruined, and eventually died in obscurity years later. He lost his reputation and his wealth, a failure orchestrated by the woman he had dismissed as a conquered object 12 years earlier.
And the genius of the revenge is that he never understood the source of his ruin.
He only understood that his ambition had been utterly destroyed by mysterious incompetence on his staff.
But the personal betrayal still remained. Her brother, Caddic, the merchant who traded hundreds of lives for his own comfortable life.
This final act shows the depth of her preserved rage. Systemic revenge was achieved, but the personal score had to be settled. She sought Caddic out in his distant, prosperous province.
She arrived at his home on a summer evening, but she did not arrive as a consultant.
She arrived with her sons, now grown men, educated in Roman law but steeped in nervy injustice. Caddic recognized his sister instantly, the successful life he built just collapsing around him.
Brennia didn't need to explain Scipio's downfall, only Caddic's crime.
She confronted him for trading the secrets that cost hundreds of lives for his comfortable, anonymous survival. She was passing final judgment.
The outcome was stark and final. Caddic was killed that night by his nephews, Brennia's sons, who executed the act of retribution without hesitation.
His Roman family, his wife and children, were spared as they were innocent of his betrayal. She ensured the betrayal was erased, and the price was paid by the betrayer. She left his house and never looked back.
Brennia lived another 15 years after that night. She never returned to the Nervi territory, which had long been settled by Romans, but she remained the quiet, guiding force of the continued Gallic resistance.
She provided advice, insight, and connections to the growing resistance elements, contributing to decades of low-level, effective pushback against Roman governance. Her legacy wasn't about rebuilding the Nervi nation in its original form.
No, it was about ensuring the preservation of her line and her heritage through the catastrophe.
Her sons married into both worlds, one Roman, one Gallic, connected to the preserved Druid traditions. Her grandchildren grew up knowing their grandmother's story and the secret of their Nervian heritage.
She died at 53 on the Italian coast, surrounded by the family she had built from the ashes.
Her final words were spoken in Nervian, the language she had preserved in secret for 12 years. She did not win the war against Rome, but she won her long game. She ensured her line's survival, and she made her chief enemy pay a political price he could never comprehend.
Brennia's story is a fascinating study in strategic adaptation under absolute duress. She navigated two brutal systems, the Roman policy of calculated degradation and her own meticulously constructed system of resistance, adaptation, and intelligence.
It is the ultimate testament to the power of intellectual leverage. Brennia was not a passive victim. She analyzed the tools of empire, the politics, the legal codes, the financial pressure points, and turned those bureaucratic rules against the empire itself.
Her survival depended entirely on her ability to negotiate accurately and understand the hidden factions and operational rules at play.
She proved that the systems of oppression can be understood and manipulated by those who are willing to learn their rules.
She sacrificed so much: her immediate grief, her royal status, and the satisfaction of physical resistance. She had to learn the system from the inside out just to survive the first 72 hours, let alone the 12 years that followed.
She had to become something neither fully Roman nor fully Jigic to survive. She exchanged her principles for opportunity, and she played a game whose success was measured not in political victory, but in preserving a future for her children and achieving cold, patient retribution against her enemies.
The question for you to mull over as you process Brennia's 12-year gamble is this. Brennia leveraged Roman internal conflict to protect her line. Consider the power structures in your own life, your work, or your organization. What hidden factions or unwritten rules exist that you could learn and exploit, not necessarily for revenge, but simply to achieve a long-term goal that currently seems impossible? What price is required to successfully play a long game against a power that, right now, appears invincible?